All right, question from a reader. Is it time to sell my store in order to free up time for personal and spiritual growth? And this comes from a person who owns a cafe and country store, a business owner. Is it time to sell my store to free up time for personal and spiritual growth? Look, there's two things I want to say about this. The first is I want to answer the question, the deep question that you're asking, but I also want to talk about where the question's coming from that may be um, just one way of seeing business or the world that may be limiting your ideas and thinking that are creating this question in the first place. So let's talk about that first. Um, to sell a business to free up time, from a financial perspective, from a business perspective, that's just one option. And it may not be the smartest option. It may be, it may be, but it may also be that there's things that you can do that can make this business more profitable and have you take very much less time, right? So on a simple level, like how could you replace yourself on the day to day? And I've worked through this with many people. Like, oh, I can't, you can't replace me, or the business doesn't make enough money. It's like, yeah, as it stands, but what needs to change about the business, how it operates, how it profits, what it sells, what it doesn't sell, how it runs its service, what the systems are internally that manage things. Like most things that human beings do in businesses can be automated and systemized. There are a lot of people still doing jobs that can be done by technology and systems and things out there. And so, like, there's a very high likeliness, especially for a cafe and store, that you could own the business and then never have to be there, just read financial statements and collect the check. That is entirely possible. My dad told me for years that he couldn't run the business couldn't run without him. You couldn't replace him. He's too integrated, he's too required. And then he had a pretty serious health issue and couldn't work. And one of the people in his company stepped up, and guess what? The company grew. It kept doing okay. Uh, and the years later, he sold it, but he sold it because it was worth a lot more because it didn't need him anymore. And so I would, before we go into the deeper question here, we'll go into that too. I think you really want to think about like this thing that's taking up all my time. What if I could own it, make more money from it, and never have to be there? What would that be like? And if it feels like, oh, that's not possible, then I'm challenging you that it's your thinking. I'm not to say you have to go this path, but it is definitely your thinking because there are many cafes and country stores in the world owned by people who live in other states, who are hardly ever there, who collect a check. And that's possible. And I think it's worth looking at what are the ways of thinking that I have that make that either impossible or challenging, because it could actually, you could create that. It is actually going to be very easy and very fun, and I'm going to love doing it. There's a coach of a friend of mine, my friend's coach. He works with people who have businesses like 500,000 and higher. And when they come in the program, the first task is to stop working Fridays and maintain revenue. Okay. Then once they achieve that, now stop working Thursdays and maintain revenue. And that's literally the path. It's like you keep doing that until you're only working 1 day a week and maintaining revenue. Then we look at how you can grow and scale the business from there. Because what that forces you to do is it looks at how to extricate yourself from the day to day and how to have the business not need you. Then when you've got your time, then you can be somebody who grows and develops it. So, you know, this is a thing. So, all right, I beat that to death. Now let's look at the other side of the question, what the question is asking on a deeper level. Is it time? Is it time to sell my business in order to free up time for personal and spiritual growth? Well, what stands out for me right away is that there's the expression of a desire for time for yourself that is not being uh, accessed and liberated and acted upon in a way that is fulfilling and feels congruent. And so you're like, okay, I got to kill something over here. Maybe I should just sell the business. Um, and maybe you should. But before we get there, it's like, let's look at that there's a deep desire for personal and spiritual growth that that you would love to spend more time on. And there's a story that I don't have enough time for it. And whilst I'm not trying to take away that the fact that there's truth to that, starting to live a different story as a first step, I have all the time in the world for personal and spiritual growth. I have all the time I need for personal and spiritual growth. Now, not doing that as a way of abdicating your desire for more, but doing it as a way of seeing that you already have and are getting what you want. The book of Matthew, I love that verse. Yeah, I'm not typically a biblical scholar or anything, but like this verse, I don't even know where it is, but to those who have, more will be given. To those who have not, all will be taken away. It applies to everything, including time. The more time you have as a phenomenological experience, the more time you choose that you have by the way that you see your life for something, the more time you will be ontologically, actually, physically, measurably given for that. So if you just start believing that you have all the time you need for personal and spiritual growth, the time that you spend doing that stuff will expand. And you'll also start to see that other places where you thought you didn't have the time to do personal and spiritual growth become time for personal and spiritual growth, i.e., you grow in your personal ability to own a business without being there in the day-to-day. There's a massive personal growth curve ahead of anybody who decides they're going to extricate themselves from the day-to-day. There are emotional challenges with delegating. There are emotional challenges with facing the financial risk of hiring people. There are emotional challenges with the uncomfortable conversations you need to have. There are emotional conversations with enduring the work of building systems and structures. There's a lot of personal growth there. And that's not time that you do instead of the business. If you were to, basically there's an integration of time that when you start to see that I have all the time that I need for something, you start to see that actually time that I thought I couldn't do that, I am doing that, or I can do that within that time. So, and another thing I'll say about time for personal and spiritual growth, I have this concept they call a 48-hour day, and that is that there's 24 hours in a day, and there's what I'm doing on the outside of my body in the world during those 24 hours, and there's what I'm doing on the inside of my mind and my body. And so there's 24 hours that run in parallel, internal and external. If I'm working in my garden, I can be working in my garden with an empty mind. I can be working in my garden thinking loving thoughts. My aunt told me this beautiful story when she ran a marathon. She had 26 people in her mind, and for each of those people, each mile, she dedicated thinking loving, grateful thoughts about that person. So everybody got a mile. And so that she ran essentially 52 miles, 26 externally and 26 internally. So I'm sharing this as another perspective that where you can start to create for yourself that you do have all the time for personal and spiritual growth that you want, and you're going to start to get what you want now immediately through your experience, and that will also start to generate external different circumstances for you in the world. And I know that there's still in this question the thing that I'm not answering yet, like the bullseye of the question is like, is now the time to do this? How do I, which is essentially, how do I know if now is the time to make a certain decision? You can't know. You can't know for sure. At the end of the day, you got to flip a coin. I mean, you can try it. You can check in. What does it feel? What feels true for me? Breathe, get a sense. But you can't know for sure. And, at the end of the day, it's like, when I got married, it was like, is she really the one? I don't know. I'm going to decide that she is. And my friend Rob reminded me of this thing that I think I shared with him some years ago. I don't choose because I know. I know because I chose. So, there you go. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for reading. Stick around for more. I love you, and I'll talk to you soon.